Parents, is your child's nervous system stressed out? You got to think, with all the stuff that's going on out there, the stress, the school, and grades, and all these things they got to keep up with, plus we add all those holiday treats we've just been getting down on, it kind of adds a whole lot of opportunity for this storm to brew. Let's take a second and talk a little bit about the science and the neurology behind the central nervous system. The central nervous system is the first system to develop. It happens around 5 weeks after conception. And this central nervous system is going to grow and it's going to drive everything else in the body. What does the central nervous system do? It's kind of an easy question. Does everything. Central nervous system is in charge of controlling. So the growth, the development, those are all going to be keyed in on the central nervous system. The other thing that's really interesting about the central nervous system is it's kind of like our central processing unit. It takes all of the senses that come up, it regulates and it says and it spreads out and it can read everything and then it gives us output. So the important thing is if that sensory input coming in is good, we get the output that's also good. If that sensory input's coming up and it's jumbled or it's not going through properly, or kind of think of it as you have a nice road and it's smooth and that road's a little bit bumpy, well, your inbound tracks to your child's nervous system, when they're interfered with, they get a little bit bumpy. And if there's a bumpy road coming in, you can surely have a bumpy road out. So that's kind of what we're looking at here. And that's why it's so important to look at it in terms of stress. Is that stress making your child's tracts that bring that information up to their brain and bring that information out from their brain, smooth roads or bumpy roads? And that's kind of the easy way to talk about it. A really interesting portion of the central nervous system is the part called the autonomic nervous system. And I kind of think of that as the automatic nervous system. It's the part that we don't really have conscious control over, but it does a ton of regulatory process within our body. So in talking about that autonomic nervous system, there's a journal called Frontiers in Integrative Neuroscience. And they published an article where they looked back on a bunch of different cases and found that maternal stress during conception, during preconception, during development, basically all the way through pregnancy and even after a birth, if it's a traumatic birth, those stressful events do have an effect on that baby's autonomic nervous system. They can influence it. And when we're talking about that autonomic nervous system, we got to examine it and say, well, what is it? How is it split up? Is there different parts of it? Yeah, there is. There's the sympathetic portion, which is your fight or flight response. You're looking across through the dark and you see two yellow eyes about 50 feet away and you're kind of afraid of it. So you get that response that builds up. That's our fight or flight response. I kind of think of that as the gas pedal. That's going to get us driving, get us going. The other portion of it is once we get away from those yellow eyes and we've calmed down a little bit, you might have something to eat. And you want to have your body be ready to digest that food, to heal your body, to grow, to take care of all the regulatory processes that aren't necessarily involved with running for your life, so to say. That's the parasympathetic portion, or what I like to think of as the brake pedal. Now, what's important with this is just like your car, you can't necessarily step on the brake and the gas at the same time. You're going to go nowhere. You're going to rev that engine up really, really high and you're going to see some issues. Essentially, that's what's happening to your kids when they're stressed out and they can't necessarily cope with it. It's not their fault. It's not your fault. It's not anybody's fault. We just got to look at their nervous system and help that nervous system to function a little bit better. It's not normal to have these adverse reactions to stress. Stress is going to cause a response to us, but it's important that our body can regulate that response to that stress. And that's kind of the things that we're looking for here. So what does this look like? Well, hold on. I have a nice list. It could look like aggression, irritability, fear of new events, constant sickness, meltdowns that happen too often or last too long, impulsiveness, food aversions, ear infections, Mr. Skip milestones even. If we go straight from laying on my back to I want to walk, we're not going to crawl, that's a really important part of building pathways, not only in the central nervous system, but through movement to make sure that those movement patterns are doing what they're supposed to. We also see irregular sleep patterns and exhaustion. And luckily I have my list right behind the camera here. You can see my eyes looking at that. So when we look at this, there are so many different processes within the body from that non being able to think about moving things or or not being able to think about regulating them standpoint, that this is a large impact on your kids. So when we're talking about all these challenges, a pretty typical approach is to kind of look at it, observe it, and say, well, they'll probably grow out of it, right? That's largely the way that we've dealt with tons of situations over time, is let's just wait and see what happens. Maybe they'll grow out of it. What we notice is, while they may grow out of one thing like colic, because you don't necessarily see 12-year-olds with colic, what happens is they'll start to grow into something else. So what started as one disruption of their normal function and their ability to regulate themselves is going to present in different ways as their needs and their challenges are changing as well. Over time, this kind of cyclic event of problem response, grow into new problem, new response, grow into new problem response, is kind of like a cyclone, and we call that the perfect storm. So I know we've been kind of gloom and doom on all this stuff. This isn't fun things to talk about. The fun thing is getting these things taken care of and seeing your child thrive in their central nervous system functioning like it's supposed to, and them not having the challenges that they're currently having today. So here's 4 things that you can do right now and get working on this. The first thing you can do is make sure they're getting adequate rest. A routine is really important. It's something that I've adopted as an adult even, that I know that if I can regulate my sleep, I do so much better at everything. I feel better when I'm exercising, and I actually do it. I make better choices when I'm not tired, and you can ask my wife, you can ask Haley. Usually in a little bit better spirits when I'm pretty well regulated with rest. The other thing you can look at is making sure that you're feeding your kids good food, whole food, real food, stuff that's kind of on the outside of the grocery store, not necessarily all the processed stuff on the inside. And that also is going to go with making sure that they're well hydrated. Water and hydration levels is huge, and as a society, we could do better at it. So reduce that juice, reduce sugary drinks, the High C, the Kool-Aid, the Coca-Cola, the Gatorade. Those things, they have their place, but not necessarily what you're going to want to be feeding your kid who's already having hard time regulating their emotions or just their responses. You throw a bunch of sugar into the mix and oh boy. You can also look at making sure that they're getting outside, using up some of that energy outside in a good environment to play and use that energy towards exercise and movement. There's so much movement that translates into input into a child's brain that is vital for the normal processing, to make sure that they're getting out and moving around and not chilling in front of a screen or an Xbox or just kind of sitting on the couch. Reading school, it's using a whole other part of your brain, but making sure that we're not just receiving input, but we're actually getting out and moving. And then our last one, of course, getting adjusted. It's really important when we're talking about taking care of children that we're stressing the point that we're looking at this from a neurological perspective. We are a neurologically based pediatric and prenatal and family-focused chiropractor, which is a little bit different than the traditional type of chiropractic where you're looking to improve range of motion and fix stuck joints. We're looking at putting an input into a child's nervous system, allowing them to function and process that better so their output is better. We do that by taking a detailed history, and in most cases, well, pretty much all cases, we're gonna start asking questions about how did the pregnancy go? Because as we talked about earlier, those challenges during pregnancy oftentimes will show their head when we're talking about challenges at less than a year old, 2 years old, 3 years old, 5, 6, 7, 12, 14. And so by looking at that history and examining it pretty deep, we can start to build those connections. The next thing we're going to look at is making sure we can get a good scan of your child's nervous system. Depending on their age, we do a 3-part scan. We're going to look at heart rate variability, which is a pretty good indicator of how your child is dealing with stress. We're going to look at thermography. We're going to see, is that regulatory process of that autonomic nervous system within your child doing its job? Or is it kind of repressed? Are we sucking the energy out of that to put it into a different location? And we're going to look at that by seeing what the surface electromyography or the SEMG of your child is. And I know all these words and these difficult things that they get a little technical sometimes, but looking at the science component, it's important to understand these terms. And that last component of that, measuring that muscle output of your child, is going to tell us, are they wasting a ton of energy just to stay upright? Can we help them to not put out all that motor energy by looking at that sensory side and saying all this information coming in has some issues with it, has some obstruction. The processing might not be doing what it's supposed to because of that data that's inadequate coming into the brain, and then the output's going out. It's just locking everything up. That stress response, your child's seeing those two yellow eyes in the darkness all the time. And we want to work on helping to regulate that. And that's a big key term there, help. We're not saying that we cure all the things in the world. That's not my goal. I'm not looking to cure everything. What we are looking to do is we're looking to help your child's nervous system regulate itself a little bit better. The central nervous system has an uncanny, amazing ability to heal and restore and function when it's doing what it's supposed to. And that's what our focus is on. Our focus is on helping your child's central nervous system to go through those steps that it needs to make sure that it can adapt, to make sure that those automatic processes that should be happening behind the scenes are functioning as they should, and to make sure that they're not wasting 3, 4, 7, 12 times as much energy as they should in output just to musculature, when they could be using that energy for growing and healing and making sure that their body's processes are working properly. So those are the really cool 4 things that you can do right now. I hope this kind of answered a couple questions for you. If it opened up a whole new box of worms, please feel free to shoot me an email, comment here. Check out our website. We've got a little bit more information on our 3 scan metrics. It does a good job of helping you get a better understanding of not only where your kid's at, but where they could be and how we can help get them there. I hope I see you guys soon. Y'all have a great day.